So after having watched Little Shop of Horrors, it was made very apparent to me that it was time to finally sit down and watch the Rocky Horror Picture Show from beginning to end. This is one of those films where you've seen clips from it 1,000 times.
Yeah.
You've heard most of the songs, the imagery and the characters and everything from it is such a part of pop culture. And obviously they have these midnight showings where people go and reenact these things, and it is like their absolute love and passion, and that's wonderful in it. And any film that can invoke that in its audience, I think, is fantastic.
Yes.
But, you know, having said that, I had never, to my knowledge, I might have when I was a kid, but that doesn't really count if you don't remember. So, for my memory, I've never actually sat down and watched this thing from beginning to end. And, you know, because I've seen all of the iconic scenes, whether it's the Sweet Transvestite song or do the, you know, Time Warp and, you know, that kind of stuff. I've seen all those scenes and I know those songs and I know all of like the iconic shots and moments from all of that. Seeing it all full in context here is different and interesting, but it does take some of the impact out of it, because even though this is a first time watch, all of those scenes that are like the big moments, I've seen them 1,000 times.
Yeah.
So it feels like I've already seen this.
Yes.
I've already seen this. And then everything else kind of almost feels like filler. Right? So I guess the thing I wanted to say about this movie that surprised me the most is how confusing and weird the story actually is, and how surprised I really was by that. Well, we were watching it. I was like, what the actual fuck is going on in this film? And then once we get to the later half, which I actually think is like severely inferior to the first half. I think the first half is where all of the really iconic, great stuff is that we know. I don't hate the second half or anything, but like pretty much everything you know is in that first half of the movie. Once we get to like Frank-n-furter's like stage dance with the statues who come to life and for some reason are now just
are demeduced.
Yeah, they're somehow like totally ready to do a musical number, even though he just like betrayed all of them and they wanted to kill him in the last scene.
Yeah.
Or like run out of there, but now they're just like, I came back from being a statue and it's time to sing and dance and we're all friends again. So you can't overthink the movie, obviously, but that from like that point on, even though all of the like, it's a fun time and that's all this is meant to be.
Yeah.
Right? It's just when we get to that scene and Riff Raff and them come through and they're like wearing alien outfits and he has like this like bun thing over his head and they have laser guns and they're like, we need to go back to our planet, which we find out they're not from Transylvania on Earth. They're from a planet called Transylvania. I was like, what in the holy fuck is going on here?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I legitimately have no idea what this movie is about. I just know that it is a very important film for the LGBT community.
Yeah.
That is for sure. Like this is about as iconic as it gets. And shout out to my buddy Paul Shunk, who said this is the movie that made him realize he was gay. That's probably common.
Very common.
For a lot of people. It's a fun movie. It's got great songs. Really great bigger cameo here by Meatloaf, who I really enjoyed in this. Susan Sarandon is a mega super ultra babe in this, but this isn't something I would want to watch a lot. This is because for me, it's mostly just the fun of Tim Curry's performance, which is just as iconic as a performance could possibly get. And then the songs. And when they're in the songs, it looks like they're having the most fun ever. Yeah. And then when they're trying to do like, because we talk about this when we watch musicals, where I'm like, I like musicals who have dialogue, and then songs, and I'm usually like, I get invested through the dialogue, and then the music is there to complement the emotional experience. It's what brings the fun or the sadness or whatever. It's like added emphasis is what the music always is for me. It's like, that's why I like the dialogue. The dialogue creates the story, creates the characters, and then the songs are an expression of the emotion, right? That is done in a way that we can really connect with it on a different level, because it's a different kind of medium of storytelling where you're showing us a more fantastical version of said emotions.
Yeah.
But because the story is so nonsensical, because the story is not connective to me as a straight man too, which I don't even know if like, I don't know what the message of the movie is, because Dr. Frank-n-furter is a fucking monster and is basically a rapist and is an egomaniac and forces himself on everyone and wants everything his way, and everyone is just kind of, I honestly don't know what the message is, because I could look at it from a few different ways, like conservative, squares, under it all, they're freaks like us, and we need to show them by stripping them down and pulling them away from their world and forcing ourselves onto them so that they can become like us and be happier. Because us freaks are where it's at or something. I don't fucking know. I'm sure this movie's been analyzed to death by people who have seen it a trillion times, and it's part of their life's blood, and they would be much better and more eloquent at speaking on this matter than me. But on my first watch as an outsider who isn't as versed in this subject, I found the messaging in the movie, if there's meant to be any, to be very muddled and confusing in that context, but albeit extremely iconic and entertaining in the songs and dances.
Yeah. I think it's, obviously an iconic film. It is definitely convoluted at times. And, there's a lot to be said about, like, sexual repression and kind of hedonism as well, sort of, pleasure seeking in general. But I think it's such a fun, entertaining film. There's so much to love about it. The characters are all just so memorable. The music is fantastic. The sets are really cool. And the costumes and everything that people are wearing is just it's so exciting. And definitely, like, the standout character, at least for me and probably for a lot of people, is Dr. Frank-n-furter. I think this is one of Tim Curry's most, like, amazing performances. And he's super hot as Dr. Frank-n-furter. And just, like, finding out that you told me, like, last night that he played Dr. Frank-n-furter in the stage play as well is really cool to see him be able to continue that role into the film, because this is one of those films that's just going to be, like, live on forever. You know, there's always going to be people that are obsessed with it. And I think it has a rightful obsession, too.
And cult status.
Yeah. But I agree with you. I think the ending is definitely not as impactful as the first half of the film.
Yeah.
But it is just so weird, and I love the weirdness in it. I think this is one of those movies that, like, if you are somebody that likes Rocky Horror Picture Show, like, that's a good, like, green flag. And if you're somebody that's like, I hate it, it's awful and it's so weird, like, that's kind of a red flag. Because it's like a film for the weirdos. It's a film for people who are alternative and, like, not mainstream, and that's part of
I think what
why
you mean
so
by
important.
Red flag is, like, we're not going to be friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me personally, obviously, if you don't like it, you don't like it. Like, that's fine. But I mean, like, if, like, there's so much in it that I think really speaks to people who are kind of more on the fringes of society.
Yeah.
And it's important in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, the music is really fun. I love Meatloaf in this.
Yeah.
I just think there's so many moments that are, as you said, like, you've already seen them and you haven't, you know, before you saw the film, like, they've bled into pop culture so much, which is really interesting because it did start out as a film that was, like, not well received in general. And it just kind of shows the power of those cult classics. Like, once a fandom, like, grows around something and it gets big enough, like, you can start seeing references to it in mainstream culture.
Yeah.
For people that, like, you know, there's tons of people who've never seen Rocky Horror Picture Show, but they know the song, you know, The Sweet Transvestite from Transsexual Transylvania. Like, they know those moments, which is really interesting to see.
I would say Time Warp is probably the most recognizable song to most people.
Yeah.
That's one that they'll play at parties.
Yeah.
Right, and at normal places. But I'm a Sweet Transvestite probably isn't going to be making the airwaves in, like, a restaurant or, like, at a bar for normies. Right?
It's so good. Just the way that Tim Curry, like, enunciates everything and the way he moves and his facial expressions and all of it. It's just so perfect.
Well, as I had told you, he based his voice on the Queen of England.
Yeah.
Which he, like, meticulously crafted when he was trying to come up with this character. Supposedly during the stage play, since I watched some video on this when I was driving home yesterday, 10 facts you don't know about Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I'm like, I don't know anything about Rocky Horror Picture Show, so you can tell me anything. It'd be news to me. Is that during the stage play, before this was made into a film, Meatloaf did do some appearances before the movie was made in it. And there was even a time where one night where Tim Curry was out for whatever reason, and Meatloaf played Dr. Frank-n-furter.
Oh, that's cool.
So I would be super
really
curious. I wish someone, you know, this is before cell phones and everyone had a camera on them at all times. I doubt any footage of this exists.
Wow, that's really interesting.
I would like to see, you know, meaty Meatloaf.
Meaty Meatloaf.
Up there in sweet transvestite outfit.
Yeah.
Yeah, the song where he's racing around inside the place. I mean, he's only in it for like fucking 5 minutes because Dr. Frank-n-furter murders him when he gets jealous.
Yeah. Because
he's a maniac psychopath. But I guess it is horror, right?
Yeah. It's Rocky Horror Picture Show.
The title, The Rocky Horror Picture Show, I don't really understand because Rocky is the name of the creation.
Yeah.
That he makes.
Yeah.
Which, once again, he's like literally creating sentient life just to be his sex slave fuckboy.
Yeah.
Horrible. Yeah. That's just awful.
7 hours old.
Yeah.
At the end of the movie.
Not awesome there. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. It's got style and pizzazz, you know, out the wazoo.
Yes,
for sure.
Definitely.
And that's where this film really shines. And because it came out in a time when things were still very oppressive for the mainstream people who had to like exist in society, and they had to keep all of this stuff in like, you know, bathhouses and outside the public's eye. And that still happens to a degree today, but nowhere near the level it was at this time. Mm-hmm. Like, for people to be able to go to this and be like, finally a movie for me.
Yes.
That stuff's great. Yeah. And I don't think people who don't get it can fully comprehend how important representation for them is in a medium like this. Mm-hmm. And they won't ever get it. And, you know, that's because most of those people who won't get it, it's because all they've ever had their entire life is full representation for what they are in everything they do, in everything they watch.
You don't even have a way of like referencing it.
No, because you've never experienced not having any.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's literally since you've been born, you've never not experienced it.
Exactly.
So it's literally beyond your comprehension. So for someone to get a movie like this, and in that time period when people were still like so, I mean, shit, it wasn't even like people didn't even really start coming out pretty like often and aggressively like I am and I'm okay, you know, fuck it, you're gonna have to deal with it. The 80s was really where it kind of started to have an uptick, but I feel like the 90s is really where people were just like, fuck it, I'm gay. And then it took like 10 years for people to be like on board and be like, all right, like I guess they can get married. You know, it's like, Jesus Christ,
so
we're
crazy.
still here.
And it's like, you know, one of those things, not to go on any tangent, because...
Yeah.
But obviously, like, gay people, queer people have existed forever. Like, forever. It's not a new phenomenon. So it's like to think that just recently we're finally, like, accepting them on, like, at least in most Western cultures, largely, and actually having, you know, media representation and all that is... I mean, it's wonderful, but it's also crazy to think. So... But this movie is just, it's so fun. It's like the main thing.
That all being said, I do want to point this out just because let's discuss that in relation to what we just said. I don't know if this, even though it is helpful to have that representation, to have it represented in this way, in a time where they're so opposed to it, and the representation does come in the way of, like, giving yourself over to absolute pleasure and, like, what would be seen as depravity, right? Which is what the film is trying to kind of push against. But it's the way that it's handled that I actually think could make it more harmful than good for the common general audience who watches this and goes, see, they're all a bunch of sick weirdos who want to push their shit onto us.
But, you know, obviously that's not the case. Like, there's freaks that are, like, straight people, too, that do crazy sex stuff. So, it is a definite...
That's why I have the problem with the mixed messaging here.
It definitely is, like, a... common criticism of the queer community that, like, there's sexual depravity all the time. But, you know, and I get that, like, we kind of talked about how, like, Dr. Frank-n-furter is a monster, he is egotistical and everything, but I think that it less of what the film is saying maybe about, like, this specific group of people being, like, you know, sexual, like, hypersexual or whatever. It's more about that now with the film, like those midnight showings that we talked about, like, people have an outlet and a community to go to and be like, you're into this, like, me too. And that's where it's, you know, important.
Extremely beneficial.
Because there's tons of horror movies. Like, horror has a lot of people that realize, like, their queer identities through horror films. But there's also a lot of representation in horror of, like, villainizing, you know, lesbians, gay people, trans people, whatever, right? So it's like, it's not so much about it's not always about what the characters themselves are. Like, they can be bad people and be whatever, but it's more of, like, having representation and having, like, characters that you can talk about and be like, oh yeah, like that villain, whatever. And it's more complicated, I think, is really what I'm trying to say, and I'm not saying it well. But yeah, I
think I get it, and I'm not going to spend the next 5 to 10 minutes trying to reiterate it for you. You're just going to have to look like an idiot now.
Okay.
But yeah, I had a good time. It's not something I'm, like, crazy wanting to revisit, but I will 100% want to go at some point to a midnight screening with a bunch of freaks and weirdos.
I would love to go.
I just was told that you're not supposed to say you're a virgin, that this isn't your first time going, because they'll, like, pull you up on stage, and I don't know if my hetero is ready for... No, it has nothing to do with that. I just don't like I don't like being up on stage
Yeah.
as like the center of attention in my eyes.
Yeah.
I know no one's probably going to be watching. Well, if they're like, you're a virgin, everyone's like, oh, pay attention to him. And it'd be like, I don't want that. I don't want that. I would just like to experience it in the building from afar. And then, you know, if I was to really love the experience and go back, I might then lie.
And be like, I'm a virgin.
I'm a virgin. Gay me up. No, it's not. I don't even care about any of that. I just think that it would be a very big missed opportunity to live in this time and to not see this whole subculture of people who absolutely make this a part of their life. You know, there's not many films that you can say that about.
Sure.
Right? As diehard of fans as we are of Halloween and all these other movies that we discuss all the time, you don't have people getting together who reenact Halloween on stage and get together every Saturday night to dress up and have learned every line and every dance. Not that there's any dancing in Halloween. But imagine like every fucking Saturday night you go out to a midnight screening and there's people who dress like Laurie Strode and Michael Myers and they like act the whole movie out.
This is like the best thing ever. I would love that.
It's just interesting that this seems to be one of the only films, that I'm aware of. It is literally the only film that I'm aware of that does this. Now, there are other movies that get midnight screenings. They don't get them this regularly. But there is other cult films. But weirdly, those movies typically tend to be movies people don't like and like ironically, as to where this is something where the people genuinely love it and they think it's like the greatest thing ever. It's their like greatest, you know, it's their favorite movie ever. And if they watch it, you know, have anybody say anything negative about it, they probably like slice their freaking throat.
Well,
to where like something like The Room is something that gets like midnight screenings and everyone brings spoons and throws it at the freaking screen and whatnot. But it's because they hate it, like they love to hate the movie. They love the ironic experience of watching a horrendous film. But this is the only film I'm aware of where this is a thing. Yeah. Which kind of bums me out because I would love to see this kind of dedication and excitement and love for something like Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think that it being a musical is obviously a big reason why it's easy for people to go. And like, because you're singing and you're dancing and stuff.
But no other musical that has this.
Yeah, but it would be cool to see a Little Shop of Horrors version of this, you know, midnight release parties or whatnot. But yeah.
I'm curious on what you guys think as to what compels people to be so obsessed with these screenings and going and dressing up and getting on stage and acting out every scene. I am curious on your guys' thoughts on this. It's fascinating to me because it's not a common thing. It doesn't happen with like any film. So why is this film garner that kind of dedication? It's fascinating. Yeah. But, Richard O'Brien played Riff Raff, wrote this movie, wrote the stage play. He also wrote the sequel, Shock Treatment, which I didn't even know was a thing until one of you told me it was, and that it deals with, like, obsession with reality TV before reality TV was a thing. It's pretty maligned and kind of dismissed by the Rocky Horror Picture crowd, which is interesting. But I would be interested in watching it at one point. But for now, what do you guys think we should watch next? Kaylee has suggested that we do
Repo, the genetic opera.
We've both seen that.
Yes, but I want to watch it and review it.
What I would like to watch is Devil's Carnival and Devil's Carnival Alleluia, which I haven't seen the second one. I did see the first. It's the same director. It's Darren Lynn Bousman, director of Saw 2, 3, 4, and Spiral. He directed all of those, if memory serves. Pretty sure he did Repo and Devil's Carnival 1 and 2. Yeah, I think that's right. I'll correct it in the comments if I'm wrong on that, but they have a very similar feel. So yeah, those would be fun. And then you also said Sweeney Todd.
Yes.
We'll look into other horror musicals, since we'll try to stay on brand for the channel. So let us know if there's other horror musicals that you know of and can recommend as watching, because it's fun.
Yeah.
And these are these kinds of movies. It's like I've owned this for years because I always figured I'd want to watch it at some point all the way through, and we finally did. We watched the U.S. version. I don't know what the difference is. You can let us know, since we found out we watched the director's cut of Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah.
And that has a completely different ending where Seymour and Audrey do not end up together. The ending we had discussed that we wanted. We were like, oh, it's a bummer. I liked the ending, but I was like, I wish I could have saw them together. I guess in the original, real theatrical version, the real version of the film,
they do get together.
They do get together, so we missed. I would have been like, oh, I would have been happier.
Yeah.
You know? But anyway. Anything more?
No. I think that's everything.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, we didn't really discuss, like, anyone else. Susan Sarandon. I said she was a babe in this, but she was great.
Everyone's fantastic. And iconic. They're all, like, really memorable characters.
Yeah.
Even the, like, background characters that are, like, hanging out. That are doing the time warp, and then they're watching Rocky be born. Like, I like all of them, too, and all their funky outfits and stuff.
Oh, I'm sure the people who go to these, like...
Dress up as, like, the most obscure person in the background. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like... Which is great. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Well, let us know what you think. And we'll see you in the comments. All right. Bye.
Bye.